from POIs, last minute protected from POIs, and 7 minute speech. And we are live, people. Welcome to online debates number 21B on the motion, which is stated in the description and on Facebook. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome the Prime Minister. You're here.
Uh, I'd like to start by explaining what the hashtag Me Too or the Me Too movement means. So basically, as you know, famous American film producer Harvey Weinstein was accused of potentially harassing many female actresses over the years, and finally on October 2017, like major file was cased against him. So basically, what happened? Um, an actress named Alyssa Milano, she was the first one to take this initiative. So she uploaded the hashtag MeToo to her Twitter and accused Weinstein for harassing her sexually. So this was followed by many more. By the end of the day, there were around thousands of tweets regarding this, the hashtag MeToo. So basically, for many years, actually, women have been oppressed in this film industry, especially in Hollywood. So this was one of the most controversial cases amongst them. So basically, we support that pointing to Weinstein only is a wrong step, because actions like these occur in almost everywhere nowadays, especially in the developing countries. So, you know, Weinstein is a very big figure in that case. So, and other than that, there are many normal people and fundamentalists who are to blame for this. So, accusing Weinstein only is a wrong turn. And other than that, it also takes away the spotlight of the main purpose of the Me Too movement, which is to actually focus on the fact that many women every year, every month are being harassed by many men, not just film producers or in Hollywood or in the United States or famous people. It's just everyone in
Point
everywhere.
of
Even
clarification.
sorry,
Point of clarification.
about which one, like, which parts verification?
Oh, okay, so I'll just take that as it's go. The motion clearly states that we're talking about holding specific public figures to account. When we're talking about specific public figures, we're not talking exclusively about Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah, we're talking about famous people, famous public speakers, famous public people, right? So that's why it was mentioned that specific individuals. So instead of specific individuals, what I would like to support is that it should have been everyone and anyone who does harass others should be blamed instead of specific people. That's the main point. Is that okay?
Cool. Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So moving on, and after that, we can also say that those specific people, well, even if they did not commit any sort of harassment, or maybe haven't committed against a particular person, so others can actually use this as an excuse to take advantage of the situation. This could be for fame, this could be as a revenge. Maybe the public figure has done something to them which has hurt them previously, or this could simply be for pity or money, either one of them. So either ways, we cannot really give everyone who's blaming the public figures, we cannot give a solid proof that Weinstein or other public figures has actually done it. So other than that, let's say in the case of Weinstein or most of the film producers who are to blame, um, the actresses or the females who want to audition for the movies or whatever you call it, maybe a series, their careers get destroyed, because we all know that the public figures, they are not just anyone. They're very powerful people with a lot of money, lots of connections. So it's very easy for them, number one, to bail out of jail or any punishments, and also to reduce the number of years they get it for. And moving on, so this means that the people who are actually wanting to audition in case of Weinstein, their careers get destroyed by him. So instead of focusing on one person, we should all try to focus on the little bits and pieces, and the fundamentalists whose mentalities are not going to change unless they themselves are to be punished. So we should focus on the Me Too hashtag was found to focus on the very fact that sexual harassment should be punished, and it cannot be accepted. But recently it has become a fight for Harvey Weinstein and to make the punishment for him more severe. So that is something that's not good, because ultimately the fundamentalists, their mentality will remain the same. And the minorities, meaning that people, let's say many people are getting harassed, many females are getting harassed, in especially in the developing countries like India. So ultimately, these countries, the rates are not decreasing significantly. In fact, they are not decreasing at all. So that needs more attention at the moment than Harvey Weinstein, because the Weinstein thing has dragged a lot and of attention. And in the meantime, the other reports, the smaller ones, are being ignored. So this is something that should drastically improve. And pretty much that's how I like to end my speech. Thank you.
Yeah, thank PM, and I welcome Leader of Up.
Thanks. Um, 7 minutes, right?
Yep.
I'll start now. The motion today says that this House regrets the shift in the Me Too movement from victims to sharing their experiences to holding specific public figures to account, right? This is what the motion is. We think that side government completely mischaracterizes and completely misunderstands the entire motion when they say that the entire Me Too movement has been completely... Hello? They say that the entire Me Too movement has been completely focused around Harvey Weinstein, when in fact it's not the case. Because the motion clearly states that the bigger issue, the reason why we're having this debate in the first place, is because some people think that the Me Too movement has been more focused on public figures with a lot of traction and a lot of influence in the world are the ones who are mostly being pointed out to, who are mostly being accused, are the ones who are getting the worst end of it all. And the other smaller cases, the other accusations are not getting enough limelight. This is not limited specifically to Harvey Weinstein. We're talking about all kinds of public figures here. We're not talking about people exclusive. We're not talking about figures exclusive to Hollywood. We're also talking about people who are very high up on the corporate ladder. We're still talking about people who are very high up in social hierarchy. We're also talking about people who are very big politicians who are being accused, right? So for opening government to come up and say that the entire Me Too movement was completely encircled around Harvey Weinstein is absurd and completely takes away from what this entire debate is actually about, right? And the harms that opening government had mentioned there are mainly two harms, right? The first one being people often accuse public figures for fame and money, and that's apparently an issue. We say that that's not completely exclusive to just accusing specific public figures. We say that that happens no matter who exactly it is that you're accusing. As long as you're giving a platform for people to speak out about sexual harassment and sexual violence, there will be some cases where it's not completely true. And the effective solution to that is to understand that it does not matter whether or not some false accusations are being made, because at the end of the day, in order for your false accusation to be bought by the public, it needs to have a certain amount of substantiative proof to it, right? And if you do have the substantiative proof to it, then most odds are it's not made up. You're not doing it for the money, but you actually have something to say, right? So that makes no sense. And opening government also talks about fundamentalists without any form of substantiation as to what exactly it is that he's talking about, because it made no sense. What kind of fundamentalist mentality is it that opening government was exactly talking about? That's something that he never specified. All he talked about was how fundamentalists are bad and how fundamentalist mentalities are growing, and they're still very much out there. But he doesn't talk about what context of fundamentalist mentalities that we're talking about here, right? So that doesn't make sense. Anyway, moving on to my arguments and why we should still be talking about specific public figures and taking them into account is the first line of argument that we have is why we need to show public figures that they're not bulletproof, that having a lot of fame, that having a lot of money, that having a lot of social influence does not make themselves bulletproof. The Me Too movement has paved the way for a new era of social accountability, and that goes to not just us consumers of popular culture or popular media, but also people who are in popular culture and people who are in higher places. Right. So it affects us in two ways. Firstly, public figures understand that they're not bulletproof, that whatever they do has consequences, that they're not bulletproof, that they need to think twice about the things that they do, specifically because of the fact that they're public figures and that they need to set proper examples, right? Without the Me Too movement, it was a lawless wasteland where people on top, people like Harvey Weinstein, people like Carlin, people like Donald Trump had the liberty to do whatever the fuck it is that they wanted to do without ever being held accountable. Because they thought that just because I have the money to buy my way out of the lawsuit, just because I have the money to buy the proof, just because I have the influence over the court or whatever to overshadow what actually happened, just because people won't care about my accuser in comparison to me, I can get away with whatever it is that I want to do. And hence they proceeded to sexually harass and sexually assault tons of people, not just females, but males and females. And this was the issue. This was the reason why the Me Too movement got so much traction, right? Because it brought accountability back to these public figures, because it made it important for them to understand that everybody has a certain amount of accountability. The second layer is when we talk about how people in general, us, people on the ground level, people on the ground level need to understand, and because of the Me Too movement, it's been easier for them to understand.
PY?
Is that sure?
Yeah. So how holding accountable public figures eventually helps to eradicate sexual harassment on a larger scale?
Oh, okay. I turned my mic off, I'm sorry. The reason why holding public figures in particular accountable has a bigger effect and has a faster effect when it comes to like solving problems with sexual harassment is simply because the fact that these are people who are always in the spotlight, right? Oh,
Last minute.
okay, cool. Because these are people who everybody looks at. When you have people who are accusing these public figures of doing harmful things like sexual harassment or sexual assault, and other people see that there is a consequence to doing that, and other people see that it is very prevalent, that even people that you idolize have these inherent tendencies to do these things that are unlawful, it makes it easier for other people to A, talk about their experiences, and B, get the justice that they need, because now everybody is up for grabs. Now everybody is going to be held more accountable. Plus, I think that that's something that doesn't stop even if we were to completely stop talking about public figures. And you have to understand that this is exactly what made the Me Too movement a stand-alone and something that made the Me Too movement unique in comparison to all the other sexual harassment movements that have been going on for a very long time, right? With that, I'd like to end my speech. Thanks. Hello?
Cool. Is Hasif here?
Yeah, I'm here,
I'm
sir.
here, sir.
Yeah, I'll go for the.
You mean DLO speech?
DLO speech दिखा.
Yes, sure, bhaiya.
अच्छा ठीक
अच्छा ठीक है.
है. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry for the inconvenience.
It's okay. Welcome the deputy PM.
Just a second. Let me turn on my timer.
Yep, sure.
Starting in 3, 2, 1. For a long time, society has not addressed the issue of sexual harassment and assault. It was something left unspoken or seen as a private matter that was often left unacknowledged. The responsibility for those abuse was placed on either public figures or were tabooed away completely from the scene. And thus, women were never able to talk it out loud about how they have been horribly sexually assaulted, how their childhood and their whole life had been ruined, and how important it is for a society as a whole, right? With that being said, the first thing I'm going to do is to clarify the whole public figure thing, which is a misconception in this debate until further now, right? The reason we took Harvey Weinstein as an example of this debate was because every public figure more or less has the same feature, right? The feature that they are powerful, that they have cash, and they have influence on the society, and they can eventually set up examples, right? That is the very basic idea of setting up Harvey Weinstein as a particular example. We could also go on with examples like Trump or James Franco or Maria Bartoli, John Bash, and the list goes on and on, right? So that is not the first thing that is important in this debate. So I guess we more or less we have been properly clarified on the public figure thing. The second thing is that Elo comes up and talks about our first argument, that is about how public figure may be accused falsely. And he believes that it may happen in any case, right? The first response to that is that focusing on the public figures specifically is problematic. Because if you think about it deeply, the odds of false accusations comes up higher when we are talking about public figures, right? Because public figures are more likely to be in the spotlight. They probably have more rivals in the industry of where they work on and whatnot, right? So it doesn't need any particular evidence to prove as to why public figures are more likely to be accused falsely, right? This is the first response to the response they gave us. The second thing was she complained about us not being able to properly deliver on the fundamentalist thing, right? So here comes the analysis. Understand, in every society, there are people who are either extremist Muslims or mentally sick people who doesn't listen to the logical ideations of the law and of the society, right? There are always people who would go on doing crimes no matter whatever they do, right? I mean, criminals have that same mindset. While talking about fundamentalists, we were talking about those fixed mindset people who doesn't really care about whether there are punishments existing for sexual assault or not, right? Because they would keep on doing it. They would keep on telling the women that, yes, because you were touched by some guy on the street, it's your fault and you were a bad woman. I guess those fundamentalists would completely go on doing it, even if those examples of the public figures were set up, right? Particularly why the argument of fundamentalists is very important in this debate, because it's a silver bullet argument they don't have a response to. Because even if you hold public figure accountable, it doesn't really help solving the fundamentalist problems, right? And I guess the whole idea of the Me Too movement was to eradicate women assault as a whole, right? So when you talk about it, talking about fundamentalists is very important, and particularly why we totally win this argument. The only argument that came from leader of opposition was why public figures not being bulletproof is important, right? Three responses to that. The first response is that public figure is not the holding them accountable is not the main concern of the whole Me Too movement, right? I guess no girl came up and talked about their darkest history because they wanted public figures to no longer be bulletproof, right? I guess what they wanted was more or less of their rights, right? Those women came out and talked about their history and all the bad things that happened to them, because all they wanted was safety. They wanted equality. They wanted sexual harassment to stop. Not that they wanted public figures to no longer be bulletproof, right? That's the first response. The second response is about how it eventually helps others, right? I guess that in order to prove public figures are not bulletproof, it's not essential for the Me Too movement, right? I mean, ideas like taxation, how they have broken the laws, are like always there as an example, right? We believe that the Me Too movement is not an exclusive way in order to break their bulletproof bubble, right? So their argument doesn't even stand. Even if it stands, it doesn't really help. Why so? I will explain it in my arguments, right? The first argument from my end is that in this particular movement, a very interesting thing happens. That is, we break a stereotype. I stereotype that if a woman talks about her most dark history, that is not a matter of shame, rather a matter of bravery, right? Remember how every woman in like underdeveloped countries like Bangladesh would stand up and talk about if would stand up and talked about how they had been sexually harassed. People and of the society would point their fingers to them and say, "Hey, you're a bad girl." But it no longer works like that way, right? Why so? Because now it is no longer seen as a taboo. This Me Too movement has shaken people and men all over the world and proved that women are now brave enough and now they can stand up and talk about it if someone does harm to them, right? We believe that breaking this stereotype was a very important concern of this particular Me Too movement, and it serves better if it is related with the victim sharing their experiences, right? Because the whole focus should be about the victims sharing their experiences, because that's when they get the bravery to talk about their victim closures, and probably the only case where this stereotype breaks, right? It doesn't really break if the public figures are held accountable. So particularly why this argument so mistrust on our end. Yeah, later on. No, not taking it. So the second idea is that victims require equal treatment, right? That is to say, if a woman X were somehow sexually assaulted by a public figure, she deserves as much treatment or victim closure as much as a normal woman in Bangladesh or in Dhaka was treated by a normal street guy, right? That is to say, sexual assault all around the world is treated the samely. So just because someone was like sexually assaulted by a public figure doesn't mean you have to give the spotlight to that particular woman and eventually, because of public figure, give the right, right? So that is to say, it should be same in all the cases, right? The second idea is about the microsocial barriers, right? How does this work? Understand, women doesn't really have problems only with the public figures, right? They have problems in their total social barrier in every step of their life, right? Which is very important. So the idea being, because of women having problems in every single social step they go through, it is important to eradicate from their micro level, that is to say, from every victim speaking up for themselves, right? We believe in our world it is better served because that is when they talk about that is when they fight against all the social barriers they have, and probably it comes up with a better lesson, right? We believe that's very important. And the final thing is that we believe in our world the Me Too movement has a better probability to totally eradicate the whole thing, right? And particularly why side proposition completely takes this debate home. Thank you.
I thank the DPM and welcome the DLR. Sorry. Hasif, are you there?
Yeah, joining in 10 seconds, man.
Yes.
Check messenger, please.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes. So, literally beginning with the rebuttals. Firstly, fundamentalists won't agree to anything. There is a reason why this policy is ineffective, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, if you don't want to learn physics and your physics teacher comes into your classroom and you just want to listen, don't want to listen to any of the part, like it is not his moral obligation or his guilt that he couldn't teach you physics. So understand that that doesn't mean that he will literally not take this class. He will literally talk about physics and the other stuff, and the people who do not want to listen to him at all, they can go to hell. So like literally fundamentalists don't cater to this rhetorics like literally it is no argument that these rhetorics are not inherently valuable. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, they seem to believe that these sorts of people have lots of enemies, and that is the reason why when these sorts of blamings come up to the society, substantial evidences are not needed because those enemies propagate it in a wrong way, right? So let's break that. Firstly, that is like literally mischaracterizing the fact. These people have large amount of fan bases. They're crazy about them. That is the reason why you need more evidences to make these crazy people understand how they can be wrong at the very first place. So literally their nuanced argument about like not having enough having enemies literally end up having no evidences to attack them literally doesn't stand. Instead, we prove to you how we need more and more evidences about those facts, and literally we end up proving whether or not he did this bad thing or not. So lastly, the consequence is that if they can prove it, then I will substantiate on my case, right? But lastly, they want to think that the significance of our argument of bulletproof argument, right? So firstly, they think that like the exclusivity of this motion is simply to cater to the general people the most, right? Literally, why are we talking about these public figures the most? Firstly, these people are bulletproof. These people live in a bubble where they think that they can screw over the media, where they can think they can do anything wrong and they can get away with it. And we want to break that cycle, right? But more importantly, let's engage to the fact whom these people hurt the most. These people want to screw over sexually to the people who are literally below them. So Harvey Weinstein, how did he literally used to screw them over? He used to break this. So literally he used his power to threaten those actresses beneath him, right? And that is the reason why, even if those actresses beneath him were molested by him, they couldn't raise a voice, ladies and gentlemen. And that is the reason why Me Too movement is significantly important for these exact actresses who couldn't open up their voice in your world, but in our world, they have the freedom to come up. So their engagement is the most important stakeholder. No, not taken. The most important stakeholder for this debate, we think, is basically these people who are literally actresses, but they cannot open their mouth simply because of that bubble that exists, that hierarchy that exists, and that lets those exact molesters get away with the status quo. But more importantly, let's bring on with the substantials of our case. Firstly, people on the ground level needs to know and have a right to know about the bad things done by their worshipped people. So understand, if those people who literally watch movies, these people worship Harvey Weinstein. And Harvey Weinstein cannot simply get away with the fact that he earns money from those exact audiences and he is literally worshipped by them. But that doesn't mean that he can get away with screwing over the CJS policies as well. But in your world, that CJS policy is insignificant and ineffective to cater to these problems. But in our world, when people literally start talking about Harvey Weinstein, and those exact audiences who worship them now know that the people they worship are not the greatest of the people. And the people they worship are literally evil, ladies and gentlemen. And we tell you, since those are the exact people from which Harvey Weinstein earns money, these people also have a right to know the information, whether or not he's a good person or not, whether or not he's abiding by the rules of the country or not, ladies and gentlemen. But secondly, ladies and gentlemen, they come up and talk about the fact that these people are going to remain bulletproof, and that is the reason why our argument. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So understand the fact that the Me Too movement is particularly exclusive because it has particularly allowed women to speak up about their sexual assault history, right? So how does this exclusively relate with breaking the bullet bubble of public figures?
Because of the exact fact that in the status quo, all other movements, all other natural movements are quite capable to deal with the arbitrary instances that happen in the status quo. But all other movements are not quite capable enough to break that exact bubble and the hierarchy created by those exact media persons. Right? They literally screw over the media day over day. They literally screw over the CJS policy day over day. And your policy, your arbitrary mainstream feminist movements cannot do shit about them. And that is the reason why we actually take those informations from the arbitrary mainstream level. We let those molested people have a go, have a right at their voice, and they literally have to substantiate later. And even if in the worst case they literally try to spread propaganda in our world, at the end of the day, in the best case, these people are literally facing social disgust, right? Because nobody loves a liar. All of what we're talking about, the fact that this exclusiveness of this exact Me Too policy creates backlash. That is your argument, right? But we show to you from that exact place, that exact backlash creates much more significance, ladies and gentlemen, because of the exact fact that all other mainstream movements are literally going to get stuck in newspapers' last pages. But when this source of backlashes happen at the very first place, they take the front page, ladies and gentlemen. Every single
Here,
person like me who does not even read the newspaper actually gets to study about it, gets to know about the fact. Firstly, he knows about the fact that the person he worships is not a cool person, he is bad as well. But secondly, ladies and gentlemen, he gets to know whether or not it is important to raise a voice at the very first place. He gets to know whether or not this sorts of evil deeds actually need to be finished at the very first place. But secondly, ladies and gentlemen, that any more POIs?
720 হয়ে গেছে।
Okay, sorry. So like
Speech শেষ করবি।
Okay, sure. But secondly, ladies and gentlemen, their question about solving large-scale problems, I think that doesn't like literally is not relevant to this debate as well. We think that large-scale problems can be dealt with the status quo, all of the policies as well. We don't think how our model clashes with that. But more importantly, 7 minutes speech chilo?
Yes.
Acha, sorry. Like,
just finish it.
With that, I would like to conclude.
That's it is. Thank you and welcome. Nahian. Hello.
Acha, I'm getting ready in like 30 seconds.
Yes, sir.
All right. Starting in 3, 2, 1. It's quite funny, panel. The Judy team side opposition themselves have conceded to the fact that the Me Too movement hasn't served its own purpose. They conceded to the fact that Harvey Weinstein or any other public figure who probably sexually assaults any attention gets a lot of attention on their public figure as to whether they're good or bad people. Throughout the debate, there has been a massive confusion of the fact that this was a retrospective debate. We were debating about the hashtag Me Too movement, which started because of the assaults that Harvey Weinstein did in the first place, and not just any other random person. But even if we concede to their policy that maybe some other politicians did, they still will lose this debate today. Why is that so? Today we bring to you mainly two clashes. Firstly, does holding public figures accountable really puts a huge impact in society and change the status quo? Second, I'm going to explain to you, does the hashtag MeToo serve the sole purpose in which it was created upon? First of all, what was the sole purpose of creating the hashtag MeToo movement? Firstly, the MeToo movement was created in order to put a halt against sexual harassment against women in workplace and film industry, not to just point out random public figure or any sort of public figure and bring his life into media attention. Basically, the Me Too movement was an advocacy for women empowerment, for women to gain equality in workplace, in film industry, to stop any sort of sexual misconducts against those women. And it was also a platform for the victims who have been sexually harassed to talk about freely about their problems or the sexual assault that they have faced in public. Those were some of the discussions. No, those were some of the discussions that ought to happen. But that unfortunately had diverted to a much more subtle sort of motive and objective. Firstly, the Me Too movement was supposed to be about advocating for women, right? It was supposed to be about stopping sexual harassment or to allow women to have voices, right? To hold every single of those person in the film industry accountable who have committed sexual misconduct against women, be it a very huge public figure or be it any small person or even a guard in the film industry. It could be any people, not just any public figure. To hold every people accountable was the sole purpose. But throughout time, the motive have changed to the hatred against massive movie moguls like Harvey Weinstein, to take revenge against Weinstein, and to punish him severely. The whole media has shifted its attention instead of focusing on how to empower women or how to stop sexual harassment, they've shifted the attention to the background of Harvey Weinstein, to dig up his past, create documentaries about how he sexually harassed each and every woman throughout the history was the focus of media for a very long time. And that is detrimental. And therefore, it failed to serve the Me Too movement. It furthermore specifically pinpointed certain public figures and disproportionately sort of accused them. And even if we agree, even if we agree that Harvey Weinstein deserved punishment, and we on team side proposition, we do agree that any person who sexually misconducts against women does deserve punishment. But what we don't agree, that's the stance in our debate, that shifting the whole media attention to the public figure is inherently problematic, because understand that these public figures are controversial. So the point of time you pinpoint those public figures, make it the purpose of a huge movement like Me Too, it shifts the whole arena to sort of like severely punishing Harvey Weinstein instead of figuring out the problem in the status quo. As my first speaker already talked about, how the society stigma needs to change and everything. How the society stigma needs to change and everything. So, secondly, let's move on to the second patch.
Ma'am, before you move on,
No. Just holding the public figures accountable really puts a huge impact in society. It doesn't. Even their second speaker from Team Side Opposition conceded that people like Harvey Weinstein gets massive media attention. People gets to understand that these people are like what they're not gods and they're bad figures. Understand, panel, that this is inclusive on both sides of the house. The fact that public figures murders other people, the fact that they drink, or the fact that they can even sexually harass people has been known for many years, right? So it's not exclusive that suddenly if you just hold a public figure, remove their bulletproof jacket, and probably show the world that this is a bad guy, the whole purpose shifts towards that particular person and everyone starts accusing them that this is the bad guy and stuff. So that whole purpose sort of change and shifts to that other crisis and not focus on the real issue. Understand that in United States, which is a democratic government, this is where the situation really occurs, right? The hashtag Me Too movement started in US, which is a democratic nation. In that nation, every public figure and almost everyone, whoever they are, even Donald Trump would probably be held accountable if a lot of people accuses her, right? So understand this. Therefore, in this nation, in both sides of the house, this huge public figure will be held accountable anyways. And we believe that in the hashtag Me Too movement, the focus has been shifted unnecessarily to unnecessary problems and not the real thing. So we told you that the crisis also gets sparks, like this sort of crisis, any sort of sexual harassment event gets sparked in media, gets sparked in newspapers, be it a public figure or be it anyone. But the point of time you bring a public figure, that's the point of time you shift the focus And that's the point of time you unnecessarily burden on that public figure and dig up his or her own past and not focus on the real issue. If it was any other person, then probably it wouldn't have been so much problematic. The whole purpose of the Me Too movement was to share about those traumatic experiences that every woman went through, to advocate for women in the film industry. But that's what have been failed from what team side opposition has claimed to be. So what have we shown you today in this debate? We told you that unnecessary and massive media attention gets catered to the need when this when the public figure is given more focus, and therefore it diverts the main purpose of the hashtag Me Too movement. And therefore it does not solve the problem. It does not solve the problem in society. All in all, we have also told you that team side opposition has failed to rebut our policy, that how it doesn't annihilate the problem in sexual harassment, and how this policy and how this Me Too movement has brought a lot of massive harm to marginally less important or less famous women in the society once they shift this focus to the public figure. Therefore, we clearly win this debate, and we're very proud to propose.
Opposition whip, Tasmia.
10 seconds. Okay. Let's start. Okay. So you have to understand where exactly it is that the Me Too movement started from and why exactly it is that it's different from other movements. That's something that us on-site opposition have been trying to explain to SANG government since the beginning of this debate, right? We've been trying to talk about, can you guys hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So that's what we've been trying to talk about, right? We've been trying to say that side government is completely blinded and thinks that we live in a world where if a woman talks about her experience of sexual assault, she's likely to get completely swept under the rug. We have to understand that this is not the 18th century. We're living in the 21st century where the feminist movement has already occurred. We're living in a world where the feminist movement has already created a platform for women to be heard. We have to understand that the Me Too movement was not the first movement to talk about sexual assault. We have to understand that there has been tons of other movements who have been giving a spotlight to sexual assault, to sexual harassment, to rape, right? Not just for women, but also for men. But it's not something that's completely new, right? It's something that has been being talked about for a while now. But we have to understand that the reason why the Me Too movement has had such massive success, such massive appeal, such a massive effect on how we treat sexual predators in today's world is simply because of the fact that it focused on specific public figures who held a specific spot in our society that held a lot of influence on a lot of people. So we explained to you how that brings you a two-dimensional effect, right? One where you tell people who are in a privileged position in society that they're not bulletproof and that they need to watch what they're doing and they can't do whatever they want. We also tell you about how people are now more likely to understand that people who they think are archangels, people who they think are perfect, are generally not. And everybody has their flaws. And it's important for us to speak up about just about anyone. And it doesn't have to be limited to public figures. It can be literally anybody. There's a certain influential person in your society that holds a higher spot than you or anybody else. And if you are sexually assaulted by this person, then because you saw the Me Too movement and how people in much higher places have been held accountable, you are no longer afraid to talk about it. That is where the uniqueness of the Me Too movement comes in. And that is what we've been banging on and on and on about and harping on about throughout this entire debate. It's something that they have not refuted from the beginning of the debate to the end. Even so, the problems that they mostly talked about, they do not have a solution for themselves. So unless they can provide a proper solution as to how they're going to fix fundamentalist mentalities, unless they can give us a proper solution as to how they're going to bring a bigger spotlight to later. Shut your mic off. It is okay. Unless they're going to give us a model as to how they're going to make all these other movements that talked about sexual harassment in the past and are still functioning to talk about sexual harassment a bigger spotlight and to make them more relevant. Since they can't do that, and since they don't have a solution to that, we don't see why they think that the way that the Me Too movement has been functioning as of now is a bad idea, right? So moving on to my main point of my whip speech. The main point of my whip speech is we're going to do a comparative and compare which model exactly here makes a better world for the victims, because the victims here are the biggest stakeholders, right? The most vulnerable party, right? On their side, and what they want, I don't know, under the model that they want the Me Too movement to function under, is that the Me Too movement gets, at the end of the day, the best case scenario is that for some reason the Me Too movement gets the equal amount of traction as it's getting right now, but even then, after a while, it's going to get lost in the sea. It's going to get lost in the sea of other movements which have been focused on sexual assault, right? And that essentially does not solve the problem in a holistic or organic way. Someone turned their mic off, there's a lot of static. And that does not make things better for the victims, right? Under our model, what we see is while there are other movements who are focusing on sexual assault stories, we also have the Me Too movement, which not only focuses on specific public figures, but also gives a bigger platform to people who want to talk about their small experiences. You see, before the Me Too movement started, there were people who talked about their traumatic stories of sexual assault, but it wasn't given that big of a spotlight. But after the Me Too movement, even people who didn't really say much, just tweeted out or just posted the hashtag Me Too, they were given the spotlight. People now know, people now can count how many people exactly it is out there that are being affected, right? And we think that the Me Too movement, because of its uniqueness, that it caters to both small cases or like cases of people being assaulted by people who aren't in a place of huge public accord, plus bringing accountability to public figures, makes the Me Too movement so unique, and that's what makes it so important, right? Also, we tend to think that their and that's why we think that it's better for both sides. Here, under our world, not only are general people having a bigger and more important platform to talk about the things, their sexual assault stories, and having it featured more, but also it's setting the tone in our society for a much bigger era of accountability and breaking the bubbles of these people in higher places in bubbles, right? This is something that would not have been solved under any other model. We have to understand that is the uniqueness of the Me Too movement, which made these public figures touchable and accountable. That's something that would not have happened otherwise, and they have not presented a solution as to how they were going to bring these people into accountability, right? And we also think that their claim that the media has only succumbed to focusing on these public figures is completely absurd. Because you have to understand that the media has an incentive to keep looking for more stories. The media has more incentive to keep looking for other victims and to give spotlights to other people and to give the spotlight to people on the grassroots level, because you have to understand the main incentive comes from people paying attention and opening the links and buying newspapers, right? If you post Harvey Weinstein, if you write about Harvey Weinstein or some public figure over and over and over again, eventually people are going to get tired of it and they're going to stop consuming the media, right? So the media has an incentive to keep changing up the stories and to keep giving spotlights to not just public figure assault stories, but to every kind of story out there. And we think that that's very important. And for that reason, and because we protect the victims in a much better way, side opposition deserves to take this debate home. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. Thank the debaters. Cross the online platform, World Wide Web, and give each other handshakes. And I'm stopping the stream. Bye-bye.